Welcome to the Global Peace Film Festival Lives Online Conversation 2024 Festival Edition. Please join me, Kelly Devine, the head programmer, and Nina Strike, founder and festival director, in conversation with Nicole Gormley and Debra Aroko, the directors behind the film Searching for Amani. You can see this film and many other films and exhibitions at our film festival, which begins the in-person programming at September 17th, running through the 22nd. Our virtual programming begins September 23rd and ends on the 29th. All of the information about all of our activities can be found at peacefilmfest.org. And now let's welcome Nicole and Debra to the conversation. Thank you for this beautiful film. We're really looking forward to speaking with you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Well, it's wonderful to have you, and we're crossing many time zones for this conversation. So let's start out by, I'm going to ask Debra first, and then Nicole jump in. Tell us about the film.
Well, Searching for Money is a feature-length documentary that is directed by both myself and Nicole Gormley, produced by Peter and Mungai in Kenya, and tells the story of 13-year-old Simon Ali, whose father is killed while working as a tour guide at the largest nature conservancy in Kenya, and driven by both the need for justice and the grief and wanting his family to make peace with whatever has happened, young Simon Ali goes on this journey to find out what exactly happened to his dad and who is behind it. And we follow him throughout this entire journey, throughout his investigation, and as he continues to grow as from a preteen to a young man who is able to advocate and defend for himself, also do his best to find out what really happened to his father, discover the different variables and the nuances behind the conflict in the region where he's from, which is Laikipia, and uncover how all of these issues came to be and how they all contributed to what happened on that day. And as we watch him grow as a journalist and as an investigator, we also watch him grow as a human being, working through his grief, building on his friendship his unlikely friendship with Haron, who is a pastoralist in the same community that he comes from. And then we get to follow him and his family throughout that and get to be a part of his world, a part of his vision, grow with him, cry with him, learn with him, and at the very end, be inspired by his story.
I think Debra said that very well, so I have nothing to add.
Well, Nicole, let's start with you then. How did you two find out about this particular story, and what made you approach it in the particular way that you did?
Yeah, back in 2019, towards the tail end of 2018, I was working on a project through a grant where we were profiling kids all over the world. And so I was coming at it from the lens of kids that live on the front lines of climate change that were in these really vulnerable times of their life. So coming of age moments, so around 12, 13, 14 years old or so, and giving them cameras and having them self-document and process the changing world around them. That was kind of the whole concept, which was, we were working in the Arctic, the Pacific, and we had a really elemental theme to it. So loss of sea ice, drought, sea level rise was kind of the unifying theme in how we chose our children to work with. And in that process, before Debra was actually involved, we met Simon because we knew we wanted to do a complementing story with the backdrop of drought. And through our producer, Peter, who went to Kenya on a mission basically to try and meet with lots of different conservancies and kids. And I mean, he casted a very wide net, and in that we met Simon, and that had just been a few months after his father had passed. And so it was just really raw. We had no idea kind of the journey we were about to go on, but what we were intrigued by was that Simon grew up wanting to be a journalist. And so he lived in this area that was hit really hard by drought. and he just took to the camera like very, very quickly. He was using the camera, and again, the context of that time too was COVID. So he was using the camera to explore his community, explore, wear his church suits and pretend like he was being a news anchor. And so I just thought that was really cool in the sense that he was going through this obviously super tragic and grieving through the camera. And from there, we just started to realize that his story couldn't be told within the original kind of vignettes that we were looking at around the world. And at that time, we also started, Debra was translating for us, and we were starting to transition to like the idea of maybe this is its own story. And so then about 4 or 5 years later, it was the film that it was, which was, we kind of stopped not necessarily filming but the other stories, but just really focused on this as its own feature-length documentary and through the lens of Simon. And to your question of how we chose that approach, I think for us, character-focused storytelling as a way to humanize these different crises around the world was just always something that, was appealing to us, as well as a way to try and expand the audience. I think for us, making this kind of subject matter, something that can be really nuanced and localized within Kenya, feel wide and feel approachable to people all over, to empathize with what he's going through. I think that was really the main push on our side, was to humanize these kind of issues, and also look at it as a way to broaden the scope of audience to these kind of traditional themes.
And Debra, can you talk about your evolution from, as Nicole said, from first coming on to translate, and then co-directing the film, and what you learned along the way in that particular process?
Yeah, I can. Actually, like, this was on a call yesterday, but I feel like this film kind of transcends what normal climate focused or climate focused films are. And for me, that was like, as a part of the crew and also like an audience member myself, for the first time, it brought to focus a lot of issues that I had never been taught about or just wasn't aware of as a Kenyan, like the education around climate change and the climate focus within the global south isn't as advanced or as in depth as it could have been. We don't know the role that we play, and we don't know how much of the effect we are experiencing based on things that are out of our control. So for me, I was learning that as I was translating the films and listening to the insight from the boys, listening to the insights from Nicole and Peter. So it was like the evolution for me also, like as a climate change activist, happened as I worked on the film, because like before that I didn't really care or wasn't really aware, because I came from a generation that was taught that as long as you plant trees then everything is okay. So it was important for me that this message continues on. Lost Kelly. But it was important for me that this message is palatable and understandable for a Kenyan and African audience, but also for a global one, for them to see their place in this entire crisis. So evolving or working as a translator and bridging the gap and bridging the worlds between the filmmakers who are based in the US, Nicole and Peter, and the boys, their culture and their worlds, was important to me. And after that, and this speaks more to the team and how forthcoming they were with listening to our opinions, not just myself, but the producers, even the sound recordist, Ronnie, and listening to the perspectives that we are bringing, in addition to the children, in addition to their mother. Really gave me the courage and the agency to kind of express myself and be involved more within story, because my background is in writing and in storytelling, came from fiction. So being able to participate in forming the story to where it is and making sure that it is engaging and interesting for audiences across the board was great for me. And we don't get traditional film education in Kenya. We don't get the opportunities that I have had for this film. For this film, more than just for my career, even for my evolution and my learning and my growing as a filmmaker, was really important. And part of that, and what is important for me, is just like the team, how willing the team is to let you learn, to let you grow, to listen. And not just for me, but the boys as well, with their interest in cinematography and having a cinematographer Campbell on board, and his willingness to teach them and have them play or learn with the equipment. I think in terms of a crew, in terms of a project, this project was a great foundation for myself and for the boys as well. And hopefully it can serve as inspiration for kids here who want to tell stories, kids who want to break into film. And it's difficult, but I hopefully shows them that it is possible when you're working with the right people and have the right kind of support systems. But yeah, so I've evolved and grown a lot as a filmmaker throughout this project, and it wasn't always easy, but having Nicole to lean on, having Peter to lean on, having our editors and our sound engineers and our colorists being willing to work online, being willing to listen to my questions and answer them, all of that kind of just like contributed to my film education. I should be paying this, guys. I should like write a check to each and every one of you.
I feel like we all feel the same way though, in the sense of it's easy to say, you know, because people are like, oh, like translator, the co-director, like we all grew so much. And honestly, like our team was so small on the ground that every single person wore multiple hats. And in the very beginning, like while there was these kind of like titles, because it was just the 3, 4, 5 of us like on the ground, including like our sound mixer and our producer. Everyone was just doing everything. And so it just very, very quickly, because Debra was listening and rewatching and transcribing and thinking and processing, just had so much value to add in terms of story notes, and because of her writing background. And so yeah, I think just through this collective process, we've all just like grown from it. It is one of my like greatest proudest moments of this film, is like beyond just the film itself. I think the way in which we did it and the relationships that we formed, and this kind of like parallel trajectory of growth for all of us has been, for Simon, include subjects, people behind the camera, the conversations that we're having from an impact perspective. It's just a really cool way to approach filmmaking as not just the end result, but the transformative process of making the film as a collective unit has been just really cool to be a part of.
You can really tell that by seeing the film. And Debra, I'm so glad you mentioned the cinematographer, because the cinematography is just spectacular. So, and you can see the collaborative nature of it, because it's so, you've woven so many different issues so seamlessly into the film, into this story, which is just a beautiful story as well. So what surprised you in making the film? And you've described what you've learned, but what can you share with the people who are watching this about how the process that you used was such a learning experience for all of you?
Should I go first, Debra?
Yes, please.
Do you want to go first?
No, you go first, Nicole. Thank you.
It's like, I volunteered, Debra.
Collaboration right there.
You're like, yes, please. I was like, yes. I think the biggest surprise is, I mean, when we screened the film at Tribeca, New York, at the world premiere, I mean, I knew we had a film that we all believed in. We'd been kind of working on it in a vacuum for a really long time, sharing it, getting feedback, kind of it evolved, in post over so much time, to be honest. But I think that moment in person of feeling like, oh, this is working. People care about Simon. They're very deeply invested in what is happening to him, his relationship with his best friend, the justice to his father, the kind of issue that's happening to. So while I'm sure there's a lot of different ways I could answer it that would still be truthful. I love that the film, it kind of sets out what it intended to do, which is resonate with people on this empathetic and human level. And I think we have always had suspicions of how effective that would maybe be to be a conversation starter. But I think experiencing that firsthand in person with people that comes from all over walks, like all different walks of life, was shocking in a really, really surprising and beautiful way. And so that's my just top of mind answer. I'm sure I could have a better one if I thought about it more.
No, that's a great answer, I think. And I think for me it was just like what surprised me is like it is possible to contextualize the climate crisis in a way that is human and in a way that also platforms or gives agency to Indigenous people like Simon and myself and people from the global South. We don't really get that level of representation, and we don't really see ourselves in that way. We don't really see what our place is in the climate crisis. And then I think using Simon as a tool, a young boy who builds his own agency through his own determination, is inspiring. So even me, who's like a decade or so older than Simon, feels like I can do something to change what is happening. I don't have to live with the last line that we have in the film that audiences will watch and will see. We don't have that, doesn't have to be my reality forever. So I think just Simon's courage and we get that with audiences in New York and in the UK as well, where we had a larger Kenyan audience. And just like, I don't know, it's really important and really valuable to see someone that looks like us, who is much younger than us, do something to change his situation for himself and for his family. So I think that's what surprised me, just like how robust and how brave Simon is, and that you can be inspired by someone so young tackling such a huge task. And it's like, I guess it's also like a metaphor for what we are trying to do. We're trying to affect change in our communities. I think that's, yeah, there's a lot, again, we could talk about, but I think that's like, every time I think about Simon, it's like, he's amazing. I want to be like him. And every time I get scared, I remember that, Simon did this since he was 13. So like I can book a doctor's appointment as a 27-year-old. That's just like a small example. But yeah, it's like being able to overcome challenges and face them head on, the way that Simon did. And welcome back, Kelly.
Thank you. It's super, I mean, Simon's whole story is so inspiring. And he is such a role model. I certainly see him that I'm more than a decade older than he is, and I look up to him.
But I think just to that point, and especially considering, searching for Amani, Amani means peace in Swahili, and just this aspect of peace being an important theme to your guys' festival. I think it was important for us to not only tell hopeful and aspirational stories through characters, but I think a lot of times when we talk about peace, when we talk about these kind of issues, it's easy to say like Simon is brave and he's a hero and he's inspirational on his own. But what I think I was really, really drawn to is Simon doesn't live in a vacuum. It's his whole family, like his mom, his brothers and sisters, his support network. It's really easy to say like, oh, he's been through this very traumatic thing, in which he has been, and just poor Simon, he's a victim of what has happened. But the reality is that despite processing the grief of this really tragic situation, that their family was filled with like so much love and so much aspiration and so many lessons that I think people all over the world, and when we talk about peace and when we talk about just the like kind of human toll of some of these things, that I just thought was really beautiful to showcase that it's not just Simon doing these things, but it's really the network of his family, as well as his best friend, who comes from a community that's honestly on the opposing side. Was this like really beautiful dichotomy of just like people seeing each other as people and not as not just on the other side. And so yeah, I think there's Simon is super brave. I'm not taking that away from him, but I think also all the other people that surrounded him were such a part of his narrative, that just felt important to showcase as well.
Oh, agreed. And one of the things that I had taken away from seeing the film was the pragmatism, not only of him, but of his family. And I mean, pragmatic in the sense of being able to balance the joys in life and the tragedies in life, and and to forge ahead in a way that I think that's what I really found admirable, and in a way that I think more people will or people will learn something from from watching his journey.
Yeah, thank you for noticing that. I think we have the beauty of it being filmed over 4 years or so. So you get the highs and lows. And so you do get the full context of what that grief looks like, because there was moments that were very despairing, very, very sad, all of those things. But I think that balance of like, there still is hope, there still is resilience, there still is fun, there's still laughter. There, you get both sides of the coin when dealing with people. And so I think trying to find that balance goes back to Debra's point of it being difficult in the edit, like where we struck that balance was always really hard of like, is this just a fun moment for no reason? Or no, this is actually important because while you have tragedy, you also have resilience. And so I think trying to figure out that line was just something we wrestled with for so long in the edit. So thank you for acknowledging both.
Yeah.
So Nina, did you want to ask them about what's next?
Well, actually, we haven't talked about the fact that the Global Peace Film Festival at its heart is an organization committed to positive change and a more peaceful, just world. What are your suggestions for people listening and watching here that they can take into their own lives?
That's a great question. I kind of wish like Simon and Aaron who are in this call, they're really good at answering that question. I think for me, and Nicole will have her own answer, I think for me, just like seeing the humanity in people and using that as like the foundation towards working towards peace and being able to live amicably with people. I think for us, what the film does, which I think makes it stand out and why it's important for audiences, is it humanizes both sides of the conflict. And like Keep It humanizes both sides of the boys. It humanizes Simon, who's a farmer, coming from a different reality from Harold, who's traditionally a pastoralist. It humanizes the conservancy and the conservation owners, and showing like the human face behind this whole enterprise. It also humanizes the pastoralist. And I think that was the goal, to see that behind all of these reports that you will see in the film and you see on TV about the conflict, like conflict can often be dehumanized or be separated from the people behind it. And you can forget that there's someone behind the gun, there's someone behind the fence or putting up the fence, there's someone who's herding the cows and tilling the land. So I think once we recognize the humanity in each and every one of us and how we all could benefit and would benefit from a more peaceful world, from a more equitable world, I think that's the foundation point. And being able to have people outside of like Keep Here see them as humans, and people inside also see themselves represented as human beings. So this is the pastoralists, this is the students, this is Simon and the farmers and the conservation workers, I think is the first step towards us working towards a more just and peaceful and equitable future. And I think that's what I hope people take away from this film. And I think that is why we took this path of growth and what self-discovery for the young boy, or for young Simon. And that's why we were able to showcase his home life, showcase his community, showcase his students and his friends, showcase that this is like, there is no singularity. People are holistic beings, and we need to acknowledge all of these nuances if you're going to like work towards solutions. So that's what I hope audiences take away.
I would definitely second that, is just seeing the humanity and the other side. Well, it's an overly simplistic answer, and there's lots of nuances to why sometimes that is difficult in terms of access and whatnot, that I think, yeah, just never forgetting the humanity on it. And then, you know, the boys and their classmates, even in school, I think one of the kids says it in the sense of like, people in this region should just talk. And obviously that's an oversimplistic, but I think we loved that the kids in the film were kind of these role models for what has obviously was out of sync with the adults in the picture here. And I think having the right stakeholders, having the right people at the table is really important. I think a lot of times peace peace conversations have been centered around and maybe an incomplete attendance of who should be uh, at the table, basically. And so I think identifying Indigenous pastoralists, voices, community organizations, just figuring out the right people that need to have that dialogue. And that is not us. I will be the first one to say that we are not the ones that have the solutions, but should advocate for a more equitable conversation of who's being represented and who's having that conversation. And then it is dialogue. And to Debra's point, never losing sight of the humanity on the other side. So.
And Nicole, that's a really good reminder of about who needs to be part of that conversation. But thinking about our audience who's watching this and people who will watch the film eventually, I know you guys have an impact campaign. So how can anyone listening to this or seeing your film, how can they support what your work goes, you know, the work that goes on beyond the film?
Yeah, definitely. We have a website, searchingforamani.com, which is because we're kind of in the middle of putting forward our impact campaign. Impact right now is something that will continue to grow and develop over time. And so I think, first of all, checking out our site. It also depends on the individual's kind of backgrounds and interests. We have a discussion guide and curriculum and some other kind of things that we're working if the education space is of interest. So if there's teachers or people that want to screen this film or show this film within their community, reaching out to us via email and figuring out a way to kind of get them the film and get them the materials. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for educators to, and other people, not even educators, just other people in their community that would want to share this film with others and facilitate a dialogue. That's, I think, one thing that can be done. And then, you know, on the ground within East Africa and Kenya, we're trying to launch a campaign, a community screening campaign, to be able to tour the film with some of these traditionally underrepresented stakeholders. So some pastoralists. We also have specifically like a woman that specializes in conservation and is focusing on mentoring young kids. So there's a lot of kind of different channels. It depends on what the interest is of the individual, but I think to kind of figure out the best, whatever your interest is and your background, how to get involved. We have options for all of it, but just reaching out to us via email, and then we're going to kind of keep up to date on what as the impact campaign develops.
And finally, quickly, because I know Nicole has to go in a couple of minutes, what's next for each of you?
Debra, you should start because yeah.
Okay, great. What's next? We're still working on Searching for Money and the impact campaign and building that out. I once spoke to a filmmaker and they're like, you know, after the film is released, you have a full-time job. And I didn't believe them until now. So Searching for Money is still very much what is next, or like what is on the table for now. Additional screenings and festivals and all of that, where we hope to interact with more audiences and build more momentum. I think personally, for myself, I am working on a second feature about a Kenyan mountain guide and athlete, a documentary feature film that will hopefully come out in the next year or so. We're in post-production. And then for like my other job, building out a program in Africa that kind of that connects post-production professionals, so editors, colorists, sound engineers, with existing professionals, especially in developed countries like the US and the UK, for a mentorship program and an upskilling program. And I'm currently co-developing that with the video consortium that I work for, and looking for partners, looking for anyone who can join in, whether they support with money or in kind. I think it will go a long way to just creating a more robust filmmaking industry in Africa.
And like Debra said, still working on searching for Amani in terms of trying to figure out. I think for us, it's important to get as many people to watch the film as possible. So what that distribution looks like. So that's always ongoing. And then trying to put together alongside Debra and Peter and some of our other team, the impact campaign. I think that's just going to be a job that's over the next year or two, always going on. And then I'm also working on a cookbook that's all about sustainability and connecting to where food comes from. And I mean, I love filmmaking, and that is definitely where my heart is at. But after 5 years, I was craving, wanting I love doing the photography, and you guys talked about the cinematography I shoot as well. And so I was looking for something tangible at the end of it. Like the film is amazing and a work of art that we are so proud of, but I'm also excited to flex photography muscles as I kind of just process what is next. But yeah, cookbook for now.
Well, this is fantastic, and we are definitely going to stay in touch with both of you to see what comes of these new projects, and to support you. As you said, it is a long trail. Finishing a film is in many ways just the beginning. So thank you, Nicole and Debra, for this wonderful conversation and for this beautiful film, Searching for Amani. And again, for anyone listening, please go to searchingforamani.com to get more information, to follow their work, and to support them as their impact campaign develops. And again, please keep in mind that the Global Peace Film Festival programming begins September 17th and runs through the 22nd for our live in-person programming. Our virtual programming begins September 23rd and ends on the 29th. All of the information about ticketing and our different events can be found at peacefilmfest.org. Thank you so much, and we'll see you at the next Glow.